Hello, hello. I started to do this on my public page, and then I realized that the topic might be a little more racy than I generally put out in public. So I put it in here, and it's a powerful topic. So I haven't discussed some of the more advanced information that I've learned. Some of these initiations go back to the Temple of Isis stage of, and that was kind of wiped out like 2020 years ago. After the Temple of Isis and those things existed at the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary, and there were actual temples that priestesses, priests, and then people could go to that were basically built to use sexual energy, sexual processes, sexual knowledge to basically awaken and heal people. And these temples basically were very important parts of society at that time. For those of you that don't know some of the details of the story of Jesus that had sacred sexuality involved in them, I'll talk about that for a moment. So Mary Magdalene, who most people, or at least the Bible, called a prostitute, it was a bit of a twist. Mary Magdalene was a priestess in the Temple of Isis. She used, like I just said, her sexual energy and her sexual knowledge to work at a sexual level with men, women, whoever came to the temples to basically awaken, heal, and enlighten them. So she was entered into Jesus's life, and he was initiated in some of these facts of the Temple of Isis by this woman, Mary Magdalene. Now, what is even deeper in that most people aren't aware of is Mother Mary, or the Virgin Mary, or however you want to call her. It's not spoken of in the Bible story, but she was a high priestess in the Temple of Isis. Now, a high priestess was privy to much deeper levels of knowledge and energetic work, and the fact that she was a high priestess allowed her to have a virgin birth. It wasn't just like kind of the Bible hints at. They don't really talk about conception other than she was virgin, but it wasn't a divine conception in the way the Bible wants to say it, where maybe an angel or whatever came and created Jesus within her. She actually used sacred sexuality principles, her sexual energy, her connection to God, etc., to be able to make a divine birth. And the result of that divine birth was Jesus. So two of the most important characters in the Bible were deeply immersed in the processes of sacred sexuality. Now, some people also talk at that time of the Essenes, Essenes. That was a group of highly educated, well-taught people from that region, and they basically were also initiated in divine rites of sacred sexuality, a whole bunch of different things. Some of the books that you can read talk about Jesus being initiated in the Essene traditions, and there's actually stories of Jesus being bit by a snake and being able to heal himself and to control different processes and healings of people and other things that were taught to him by his parents, being part of this Essene tradition. Those you can still hear people talking about Essene traditions as well now. I don't know a lot about them. I haven't explored them, but it's another facet of what I guess we'd call a mystery school now, where really high knowledge was shared over the course of a lifetime and you would get initiated into these things and move forward. So as part of going at a higher level of our sacred sexuality to be someone that was in a scene or a priest or a priestess in some of these temples, there's actually initiations that you would have to go through. Those initiations, generally, in my understanding, would be between a man and a woman. And basically, it would be a very deep level of sexuality where one partner would be lost in an alchemy and a sacred activation. So an act of sexuality would happen. There would be an agreement that a container would be held. Usually, in my understanding, this would be done by a man, held for a woman as the first step, and basically during the orgasmic stage, a heightened level of orgasm of sexual pleasure was achieved, and basically an act of alchemy would happen. Basically, the way it's been described to me, and I've witnessed it now, that act of sexuality will create an alchemical reaction in the person's energy. When we're talking about a woman in this first state, basically it's been shown to me as like gold being made molten or melted down until it's in its liquid form. And then at that stage, chemicals are added to the purification of gold that creates something called dross. And dross is that black, looks like rock. If you ever seen on TV or some of the shows where a gold bar is melted down and then after it's done, there's this like black residue on the outside. That dross is all the impurities that are taken out. And this can be done to a person. This act of holding a sacred space for another, it's a very sacred thing, but it involves orgasm and sexuality, where one partner agrees to go to this depth, and this alchemical reaction happens, and then the other partner, the man in this case, or I've had this experience with a woman, and basically, I call it like a person kind of cracking open. Basically, all their trauma, emotions, anything that's not in alignment with their fullest expression of self starts to come up and it'll bubble up, and it may need to be talked about, or it may be anger or fear or emotions. And basically, the partner that's in the orgasmic state or the alchemical melting down can feel pleasure. It can also feel uncomfortable and painful with a lot of emotions flowing. But essentially, very rapidly, they are moved through a clearing of things that are no longer in alignment. And I've had this take like 6 hours before, because it can be a very strong process. And it's not for the faint of heart, because a lot of stuff will come up. But it's a very sacred act, because the man will take on that sacred container place. The woman will bear all, basically, in the alchemization of basically everything that's her, and that purification process begins. Now, a similar process would happen between a man and a woman, probably the same partners. I don't think it has to be the same partners. It would all depend on where the initiations happened, etc. But in this case, the man would be brought to his highest orgasmic bliss, while the woman's holding a crucible level of container, and basically he melts himself down, and basically a lot of emotion comes out, and the woman holds space to basically let all those emotions, let all that dross bubble up while he's in his liquefied state of alchemy, of purifying his gold. And basically, once that process is complete, I see it as new and heightened states of sovereignty in our energetic field. So at that point, we've cleaned up a lot of the impurities that are going on. It accelerates the awakening process. It accelerates our self-mastery, because the intensity of what's faced, the level that the energies go, and the intensity of what shows up, you have to have tools to develop it. So it's not something a person would just play with. It's something that they would build skills in dealing with triggers, understanding the traumas, how to deal with energy in your body, how to move energy in your body. These are all parts of this higher level awareness that would be given before what do they call it, an acolyte or a neophyte or whatever would step up to be initiated. But once the initiation is complete, we as a being have a really clear awareness of our full energetic field, our sovereign beingness. And once we go through that point, the final level of initiation, the third level, where now all of a sudden those persons that are now initiated in the levels for themselves of that sovereignty, now they go into an even deeper sacred sexual act. But in this case, no one specifically holding a container for the other. We go in basically joining with God. It's a melding of energies, and the outcome of the process is we go back to that purification stage. We're now mixing our fractal of God, or our fraction of who we are, into God source, into the flow of the universe during that sexual act through pleasure and other things. But we basically, by the end of it, come back in full and completeness of being ourselves. And it makes it teaches us a whole bunch of things. Like when we're building our knowledge and awareness of our bodies and our sexual union with another, quite often we end up with circumstances where we're melded with that person, and then we pick up some of their trauma. Or I've heard women talk about men dumping their stuff into them as part of lower level 3D based sexuality. Well, these are all sovereignty issues for both members. And I'm not saying this is a woman's fault at all. I'm saying this is a man not being aware and a woman not being aware, and they go into this act of union and energies merge, and then they don't have the tools, they don't have the awareness to be able to step out and then release each other. And it's quite a simple process. It's just consciously choosing to separate the union at the end of the act. And I guess 3D reality and marriage and other things has made it feel like we have to stay attached to another after our sharing of sexuality, which causes these little what I call cling-ons, like hooks that have been gone, and they're clinging on afterwards. And what's really needed is just some training, some teaching, some awareness of our energy fields, and how, as an empath and an energetic being, that by merging with another's energy, we can get lost in their energy and get lost in and end up taking parts of ourselves or giving up parts of ourselves. And these initiations are teaching our bodies to stay sovereign, because ultimately we're all part of being a fractal of God. We're part of God's source, universe, etc. Reality is all coming through our creation ability as a part of God. And we don't really understand how powerful we are, and how powerful our sexuality is, and how powerful the acts of sexuality can be in merging and joining with another. And when we don't really know where our edges are of what we are and what somebody else, we end up with all these Klingons, like I'm calling them, where empaths will attach to a person, a part will stay with them to try and heal that person or fix them or save them or whatever. And then we end up really confused because we're feeling emotions that aren't ours. We're feeling other people's trauma, etc. When really we were only meant to have these gifts as a tool to be able to help another, to see into another, etc. But we never really been trained in any of these things. So these initiations that I'm talking about train you deeply in these steps. And then once you get to that level of self-mastery, your ability to create in the world is much stronger. The distortions to our creation and manifestation are much less. And it gives us also this gift. Like I said, it was priests and priestess who would go to this level, but it gives us this ability to share acts of healing and sacred sexuality with another, for helping them to heal and purify themselves. And when we know really what's ours and what's theirs, it's much easier to read another person's energy. It's much easier to read their energy during sexuality, during orgasm, to address what's showing up and separate that from the healers or the priest or priestess side, and differentiate that from the client or the person getting the act of sacred sexuality. So I just want people to know, because I come across people that are sexual healers sometimes, and they feel this pull and this calling to help people and in these areas. And in going forward, we're going to recreate temple spaces like the Temple of Isis, and people are going to be called into these healing spaces, and they're going to be asked to do these initiations, and then they can do these initiations with other people as part of their own spiritual and other development. And these are not like instantaneous processes where you're healed. There's integration periods after, there's some training required, etc. But there's people that are being called into these, and they're going to feel they need the initiations. And I'm just kind of giving a picture of what some of those initiations are. I haven't got into details about the ceremonies or the processes or whatever, but I'm just saying that these mechanisms are coming, and we're having to purify all of our sexuality. Everybody's sexuality is shamed and guilted, and it's a big mess. And there really, really needs to be people that are willing to take these steps and to purify themselves, and then go out into the world and share them with others, so that other people can get to those levels again. And once this is prevalent knowledge back in the world, so much trauma, so much healing, so much clearing is going to happen very, very rapidly through going through these intense initiations, and people will be different and changed afterwards. So, and that just to conclude, these aren't for everybody. These are very intense processes that will make you face a lot of energy and a lot of yourself and your programming. So it's not something that everybody's going to require or need, but there's going to be certain people that are going to need that level of integrity in their system, in their awareness, in their ability to manifest, etc., to give the most powerful, beautiful life they can, and they're going to want to go on this path. So this is probably the most advanced level topic that I've talked about here, but it's popped up with a few people lately, so I think it's important that some of these things are discussed and shared. We can go into some books and stuff like that. There's a lot of Mary Magdalene stuff that has in some of the books the speaking of these things. So it's not like I'm just popping this out of my butt or whatever. It's been around for a long, long time. If you know who Isis is, she's the goddess of sexuality and healing and other things. So some people that have felt callings towards Isis, I've had a very strong pull towards Isis. I've also had very strong pull to Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. I know I've been a priest in this in past lives, and this stuff is being shared with me so that I can share it with you so that we can start to rebuild this. And I know there's people out there that have the same knowledge, the same awareness. We're starting to come together to connect all the dots in this stuff so that we can rebuild these temples, rebuild these initiations and ceremonies, and pull them out of the darkness, because they've been subjugated for so long because they're so powerful. So if there's more questions, put them down below. Yeah, it's a beautiful process, very intense, and it's going to start needing to be happening here very soon. As the world ascends, we're going to need to have these processes, these ceremonies, these things brought back to life. So I love you all. You have a good night. Enjoy your awakening through sexuality.